Hello,
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Jen.
I'm Kimberly, and this is
This is
That Vegan Morning
the morning
Show.
show. Hey, we said it at the same time this time. We did
We
good.
did. Look at us.
It only took what show is this? Number 8? Is this number 8 or number 7?
Yeah, I think it's number 8.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
I
How did
know
that
it's
happen?
I don't
Good
know.
morning.
Time just keeps going by.
It sure
Good
is.
morning,
We have
Diane. Thanks for
Diane.
being here.
Yeah, thanks, Diane, for joining us, and Richard. Awesome. Thank you for
Yeah.
being here
Hey
bright and early
guys.
with us. We have quite a show to talk about today. And before we do all of that, how was your weekend, Kimberly?
My weekend was amazing. And by the way, as we chat throughout, I always forget to say this. As we chat this morning, please feel free to put your comments in the chat. Let us know how you're feeling, what your thoughts are as we go through this very varied conversation. Uh,
Absolutely.
my
Thanks
weekend
for
was
saying that, Kimberly.
amazing. I got to meet, I spent all weekend essentially like little bits of every day at Ethos Farm to Health, which is a doctor run farm where the focus is
Mm.
on the health of the soil, the health of the people, and how we can also make the world a better place by doing those two things. And it's run by Dr. Ron Weiss, and he is amazing. And welcome, Dominic. Thanks for joining us from Connecticut. Very cool.
Hello,
Not too
Dominic.
far away
Welcome.
from the two of us. Yeah.
Yeah, not too far, just
And
over the next state.
yeah. And so I was there on Friday for a discussion and a reading from the book Hungry, Beautiful Animals by the author, philosopher Matthew Haltman, and it was amazing. The conversation was so rich, and people had lots of things to say about it. And I look forward to maybe we could even have him on the show so he could tell us all about Hungry, Beautiful Animals. So
That
we'll
sounds
see
great.
about that. Then, of course, I was there on Saturday to get all of my veggies and tofu. And then I was there yesterday for a bird walk. One of
Mm.
the one of the people who is also a friend of Ethos. She is a birder and she just loves taking people around to hear and look at birds. And so we spent about 2.5 hours just walking the farmland and pointing out different birds and listening to their calls and just chatting about the beauty of nature. Yeah. How was
That
your
sounds like a
weekend?
really great weekend.
It
And
was.
yeah, that's something I always want to learn more about is birds, because especially since we moved to the Hudson Valley a couple of years ago, almost 2 years ago, we see like a lot of bird activity and like noticing personalities and like
Mhm.
how and it I found myself Googling a lot last summer trying to learn about different birds. So there's a lot more to them than just flying around. There's like a
Yes.
whole world that they're in. So that must
Hmm.
have been really cool. My weekend was good. I did different things. I got my hair dyed on Saturday because I'm not ready to go fully gray yet. And so periodically I have to make them go away. So I did that. And then yesterday I got to drive to Schenectady, New York, which is like an hour and a half-ish away from me, to the Capital Region Vegan Networks. They had a membership potluck, and I recently became a member there. They're doing amazing things in the community, and so would love to have them on in the future as a guest. I spoke to someone there, and stay tuned. But yeah, great organization. I highly recommend checking them out.
Awesome. So let's get into, because we only have a half hour, right?
That's
Let's get
right.
into it. So today is Cinco de Mayo, which my experience not being Mexican or Mexican American is that I remember Cinco de Mayo friends inviting me, like, hey, let's go to this Mexican restaurant and get hammered on Coronas and eat tacos. Not even a thought of like, what does Cinco de Mayo mean? Why are we celebrating it? And is getting hammered and eating tacos like a way to honor that? So it was interesting when we realized that this show was falling on Cinco de Mayo and we did some research. So Jen, tell me what you learned about Cinco de Mayo and what you thought Cinco de Mayo was before this research.
Yeah, so like you, except for Coronas, I thought it was getting hammered on margaritas and
Oh,
eating
right.
tacos.
Yes.
And there's a lot more to it than that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I kept hearing, I always thought it was Mexican Independence Day. But I remember hearing somewhere that there was actually more to it. And so we were both really intentional in trying to understand it more. And yeah, it is not Mexican Independence Day. It commemorates the Mexican victory over the French at the Battle of Puebla on May 5th, 1862. So it's specifically about this battle. And then I was reading how it's supposed to honor Mexican American heritage in the US, but I feel like that got lost, somewhere it just became all about margaritas, Coronas, and tacos.
Mhm.
And yeah, so it was interesting just reading a little bit more about that. And yeah, what are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah. So Mexican Independence Day is September 16th for
Mm,
anyone who might be curious about when Mexico is actually celebrating that day every year.
thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, of course. Um, my research kind of came up with well, obviously the same thing you did with the Battle of Puebla, and they celebrate it really just kind of in that area. It's not Cinco de Mayo is not a thing that all of Mexico celebrates, because the Battle of Puebla was it happened there, so they celebrate it in Puebla. And then also that it actually took it's more of a symbolic celebration, because while they had defeated the French in that battle, the French didn't leave for like another 5 years. So
Mm.
it was more of like, this is the representation of Mexico standing up to foreign adversaries, and the proof that they could do it and get France out. So it did take a little while after the Battle of Puebla to get the French to leave them, and let them go on and be. But it is like a symbolic kind of where they were headed, which I thought was pretty neat. And they do typically celebrate with traditional Mexican clothing, dancers, music, mariachi bands, foods that they eat, but not in the like, let's get wasted at the local, on the border chain. um, so I'm really glad that it fell on this day, so I could learn something and appreciate, what Cinco de Mayo actually means, not what we've Americanized it to be.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all that, Kimberly. I agree. I think it's so important to understand things. Like, we go along in life just doing things because that's what we do, right? That's how other people did it. And that kind of ties in with veganism, right?
Yeah.
When we're not vegan, we're just, this is how it is, right? So we just go
Mhm.
along doing it without doing the research. And so yeah, we're one of the things this inspired us to talk about was misconceptions in veganism, because there's a lot of them, especially a few common
Mhm.
ones. But then also we had the Kentucky Derby this weekend, and there was misconceptions about that. So do you want to was there anything else you wanted to share on Cinco de Mayo before we pivot to our other topic?
No, yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, so the Kentucky Derby was Saturday. And usually people associate that with fancy hats and mint juleps, more drinking, right?
Mhm. Hard
um,
eye roll.
what's that?
I said hard eye roll.
Right. And it's like looked at this great celebration and everything. And I used to like watching horse racing before I was vegan and understanding all these different things. And then when I became vegan and started, not just for health reasons and with the food stuff, but just in other areas of my life and how I conduct myself, I realized that, horse racing is not a good thing. And then recently, I didn't really do so much of a deep dive in it as I did this weekend when we were talking about this topic. But there's some really horrific things that go on in the horse racing industry. For example, the horses, they have to run so fast that their lungs can bleed, and they have to take medications to help with that. Not to mention all the other practices that are done, but just the lung bleeding and running was just one of those that kind of like haunted me for a little bit, just thinking about these poor horses running. Meanwhile, everyone's celebrating and cheering in their fancy hats and mint juleps. And these horses are, and then not to mention the broken legs. There was a race a week ago where at a track, I have it down. I forgot the name of it. I have to like look it up.
Churchill Downs.
Thank you, Churchill Downs. Together, our brains work as one in the morning.
That's
right. Churchill Downs. And yeah, there's been a lot of horses yearly that have injuries. And if a horse breaks their leg, a lot of the time they have to be put down. And there was a horse last week who broke both front legs at Churchill Down. And then also this weekend, there's other races at the Kentucky, before the Kentucky Derby, there was a horse injury. And so we don't think about these things too often, and they're not going to, they touch on it in the news, but then everyone just kind of moves on and goes back and doesn't think too much about it. Anyway, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah. So I too read about the lung bleeding and then the medication to stop that, or at least make it so it doesn't have them collapse while they're racing. And I too was horrified by that. The horse that you mentioned, whose front legs were both broken, it was named Valley of Fire, and his owner, he had only run him in 3 different races and had only earned him $6,400. So that was the commentary about losing this horse. And he broke his legs. It wasn't even a race. He was training. So this horse, was training at Churchill Downs, was not even running a race when he broke his front legs. And I did some Googling about horses breaking their legs. And like you said, very often the only option is euthanizing them, because I wanted to know why, because I'd heard that. And horses, they're obviously very large animals. They're very heavy. They're putting a lot of weight on those 4 legs. They also are very easy to scare. Horses panic very easily. They don't like loud noises. Being approached from a certain direction can sometimes make a horse kind of get upset. And they can't lay down. They're not like humans where they can just relax for a couple of weeks while their legs heal.
Right.
Be in a cast and just hang out for a bit. They have to be constantly up and moving, and they can relax for a little bit, but they've got to get up. And so all of these things kind of create a scenario where if their leg could heal, it's the chance that it would heal is pretty low. And that really made me upset, because then as I'm reading about it, in both the AI summary and various articles I found, they said that with proper veterinary care, many horses can recover from a broken leg and even return to work. I know everything is about how can animals serve us? How can we take advantage of what they have, their strength, their ability, how they can entertain us, whatever it is, and how can they make us money? And oh my God, I'm so angry. And this guy who owned Valley of Fire has been racing other horses for years, and he has made $23 million from racing horses. Imagine what we could do with that money.
Yeah.
And
it's very upsetting. It's very infuriating, because and this is the plight of being vegan, right? Because we think about these things, and we, the stuff that people don't normally think about. And I used to not normally think about it. Be like, oh, let's go to a horse race and watch the horses run. And now I know better. And then doing this deep dive and reading up on this. And yeah, it's all about money. And I think too, the other thing that came to me on all of this is like, bullfighting is blatantly, you see the animal is being tortured. But here, there's a behind the scenes that most people don't know about.
Yeah.
Right? It's the mainstream media makes it all about put on your best horse racing hat and let's just get a mint julep and let's make some fancy party food and have a great time watching these poor animals be tortured. But no one knows that it's happening right in front of us. So
right. And you know what I've heard so many times is those horses are treated better than most people's kids.
Oh yeah. Or those horses have a better life than we do, right?
Right.
That's
I know.
That's another common thing.
Yeah.
And
meanwhile, they're suffering every day.
And it just goes to show, and especially now, we're in a day and age where we have unlimited information at our fingertips. And so I feel like all of this has made me want to even more just look things up and understand things more, right? There's so many things that are part of our normal day-to-day culture. And I feel like it's so important to understand things. And we can always change. It doesn't always have to be just because we always done it this way. But again, because of money, right? That's why people don't want to let these things go. So yeah, such a very emotionally charged topic. And it's so interesting how all these things tie together. We knew this was going to be an interesting show. Normally you don't think these things would all tie together, but they all do connect.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we move on to the vegan thing, I'm going to put a link in the chat to an animal rescue sanctuary here in New Jersey called Rancho Relaxo, run by this woman named Caitlin. And Caitlin started this sanctuary by taking in a horse. And she has taken in horses from abuse cases. I can't remember. I think one of her horses, Jake, I think had been a racehorse at some point, but she posts regularly about horses that are in her care, how she helps others who have horses or who have adopted horses. And she's just really amazing. The work she's doing is really incredible. So if you'd like to, check that out, I've put the link here. And we can add it to the show notes. But yeah, it's a really, really amazing place down in South Jersey.
I'm going to go check them out because that I love reading about different animal sanctuaries and that ties in with this. And if there's a way to help places that are helping racehorses and other animals, then it's great to do so. That's we can't control what other people do and how they abuse animals, but we can control by what we do by sharing information and supporting places that do help animals have a better life.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, this was a heavy topic.
Yeah.
Let's pivot to the other important topic that we wanted to discuss, which is the misconceptions of veganism. And there's the common one. It's too expensive, right? That's one of them. What are some others, Kimberly, that come to mind?
You won't get enough protein.
Yeah, not enough protein. And then also it's not healthy, right? That it's all processed food. Right?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So you want to focus on those three because we can go on and on and on and I've done shows on my vegan that could take up an hour on this topic. So how about we start with expensive?
Yeah.
Because that's a typical one. A lot of people think it is processed foods, and there are processed foods out there, but you could actually spend less on your grocery bill if you, First of all, beans don't cost a lot. And if you buy dry beans, they're not very expensive.
Mhm.
And you can do a lot of great things with beans. You can make your own homemade veggie burgers, which takes
Mhm.
no time at all. So much easier, so much healthier, and really doesn't cost a lot.
Right.
Rice and pasta, right? These things are vegan, and vegetables, and also frozen vegetables, right? Because another thing that happens, and I've been guilty of this too, is sometimes I get really excited. I see a lot of great fresh veggies. I buy them, bring them home,
Mhm.
and then they don't use them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they
great.
liquefy in that drawer.
Yep. They make their own little soup.
That's right.
And not a good one either.
No.
And so sometimes if I know I have a busy couple weeks, I'll just buy a bunch of frozen veggies. And a
Mhm.
lot of the time they're flash frozen to protect the nutrients as soon as they're picked. So they're still nutritious. They don't cost a lot. You're saving on waste.
Mhm.
And so you can make a lot of great flavorful meals. And not have to spend a lot. It doesn't have to be processed food.
Right.
What do you think,
Yeah.
Kimberly?
Well, I think it's important that people remember that vegan food, whether it's vegetables or the processed burgers from Impossible or the frozen chicken patties, I think it's important that they remember that those are not subsidized.
Right.
Meat, animal products are subsidized by the government. If people were
Mm,
truly paying the cost of what those animal parts would cost them without the government subsidies, I think they would be horrified by what they would spend, and they would realize that it is not veganism actually is not any more expensive in the grand scheme of things, and it really is just that help that they're getting from the government that they don't even realize that that is what's making it seem that way.
right. Absolutely. And right. Because the dairy industry, the egg industry, the meat industry, all these things are being subsidized. And yeah. And also, again, it's all about money, right? There's
Hmm.
this theme about money. And one of my favorite books that I read last summer, How to Argue with a Meat Eater and Win Every Time, which is not just about arguing, it's about having constructive conversation. But Ed Winters debunks a lot of the claims against veganism and talks about how how certain organizations will make certain statements to support the egg, meat, and dairy industry, but of course they will, because they need the money, right? It all goes
Yeah.
down to the money part of it. And so yeah, it doesn't, I always say you can eat as cheaply and as expensively as you want on a vegan diet as you would on a non-vegan diet. And the same thing goes to health, right? You can eat as healthy or as unhealthy as you want on a vegan diet as you would on a non-vegan diet,
Hmm. Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Was
Yeah.
there anything so do you want to pivot over to that for a minute, like the healthy part? Not eating vegan is healthy, right? But people, again, they think that it's all substitutes. And I've seen articles, right, that do spin it this way, where it's
Mhm.
like Beyond Burgers are not healthy, or this burger's not healthy, or
Mhm.
this vegan this and vegan that are not healthy.
Right.
Well, again, veganism, and we've talked about this many times, it's not about health, right? You can eat,
Right.
if you want to eat whole food, plant-based, and you want to focus on the healthy aspect of food, but veganism isn't just eating, right? It's
Right.
also the other things, and being mindful of those things. And so taking one thing and then spinning it to fit a specific
Mm.
agenda. Can't talk this morning. Trying to spin and make it about a specific agenda. It's passing around misinformation. And I remember in the How to Argue with a Meat Eater book, Ed talks about how back when smoking was a thing and people started talking about how it wasn't healthy,
Mhm.
um, they tried to make it out like it was healthy, right? And there was like conflicting information out there because the cigarette industry didn't want to lose money.
Mhm.
So, who's funding these reports? And that's the important thing to do, right? Like if whenever, and I feel like this goes for anything, right? Especially in this world of misinformation that we're in right now. With
Mhm.
anything, if it's always important to look at the source and read additional sources before just, oh, so and so said this, so this is how it must be.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Kimberly?
So I appreciate how when you pointed out that veganism is not just about food. People get so focused on food, and I think a misconception around the entire concept of veganism is that it's too much. I can't possibly make all these changes. I can't possibly be vegan because it's just, how do I even track all of the things in my life? And my answer to that is that just like any other guidelines that you follow, I think it veganism gives you the structure, and then each
Mhm.
time you make a decision, you just think about what veganism means, and then in that moment you can make a decision, and then before you know it, you've made a bunch of vegan decisions and now your life is vegan. And it doesn't have to be this huge thing. Like some of us are in the space and have the ability and everything to overhaul and completely change our life from being non-vegan to vegan. We have money to replace things. We have money or the ability and time to do the research and do it very quickly. But most people don't. Most people have other things going on. And so if we take this big umbrella of veganism and how it encompasses our entire life, and we think about how every single day we're making choices anyway. We're choosing what to eat, we're choosing what to wear. When we have to go shopping for new clothes, we make choices there. When we can just kind of focus on these little choices that we're making, we don't have to see the whole big picture. And we know that we are living in alignment because we're using those guidelines of veganism to help us make these choices.
100%. And it doesn't always have to be an overnight choice. Like for me, it took me 2 years before I fully committed to being vegan. And that was just the food part.
Hmm.
And then, but I was reading up on the other things. And then I told myself that, once I committed to the food part, I would commit to all the other parts too. And it took time, right? It took time getting rid of certain, clothing things that weren't vegan, right? It took some time to go through all of that. And then we talked about this before on a previous discussion where sometimes you find out something you think is vegan and then it's not because of hidden ingredients that you don't realize
Hmm.
are vegan. But you don't beat yourself up, right? Because again, I feel like it's all about intention, right? And so if your intention is to do better and make a conscious attempt to not contribute to the suffering that's happening, then I feel like that's the important part.
Hmm.
And as you learn, you go along, and you understand things, and it becomes second nature. Like I don't feel restricted. A lot
Hmm.
of times, people say to me who aren't vegan, well, don't you feel restricted? You can't do anything. I think about the things I can do,
Yeah.
right? Instead of focusing on what I can't do. And
Hmm.
and if the things I can't do don't involve contributing to something that doesn't support my values, which is contributing to animal suffering, then I don't feel like I'm really missing out on much.
Yeah. And it's interesting, the talk that Matt Haltman did on Friday, and the focus of his book Hungry Beautiful Animals is the concept of going vegan, and not that it is a journey,
Yeah.
and that you don't, it's still important to understand the meaning of the word vegan. So if you're still eating animal products and buying, leather handbags, don't call yourself vegan. But if your intention is that you are going to get there and you're making choices, and someone says to you, oh, I saw that you ordered a veggie burger when we were at lunch today. You can say, yeah, because I'm going vegan. And the thought of, instead of thinking about all the things you can't have, and I like to say won't have, because it is within your
Mm,
control. You can
yeah.
have, and you can have anything you want. but you've made a choice to not have certain things. But the focus really could be, like you said, on all the things you can have, all the things you can do, and the beauty in all that you can do without it hurting someone else is like, how do you see that as a negative thing? It's
Yeah.
the most beautiful thing, if you ask me.
100%. And if you speak to vegans like us, and we speak, and you have a vegan community, like we're lucky to be part of a big virtual vegan community.
Yeah.
We don't feel like we're missing out on anything. There's another aspect of joy and happiness that you have when you commit to being vegan. And I think too, like, and that's a big part of it, right? Find your people. And I like what you were saying about going vegan. I referred to myself for a while as an aspiring vegan, right? Like
That's good too.
I want to get here. I'm not there yet, but it's my goal. And that's okay. And if it takes you 2 years or 5 years or whatever, the fact that you're making little changes and just being mindful, right? I think that's one of my big takeaways of our conversation today is it's just being mindful and understanding things. It's so, it makes me think of the movie The Matrix, right? Like we just kind of go about our lives not realizing what's really going on behind the scenes, right? And there's so much more that goes on. And if, we can learn things and we can make changes to do good.
Yeah. And stay curious. Like you were a great example today talking about how before you in your pre-vegan days that you would go to a horse race and you would have fun and there wasn't a thought about really what all of it meant. But now you were willing to like pull back the curtain, as they say, and really look at like, okay, what does this actually mean? And what does this entail? And if we can just stay open and curious every time there's something new and not get stuck in this like, oh, it means I'm not a perfect vegan because I didn't know X, Y, and Z. We're all learning. And I say this all the time, but like we live in a non-vegan world. There's always going to be something while we're living in a non-vegan world where we go, oh shit, like I didn't realize that, or I hadn't thought about that before, because so much animal abuse and use is just, it almost is ingrained in people because it's just, what we grow up seeing, it's what we grow up experiencing. And it almost sometimes can stop you from questioning. So if you just stay open and keep questioning, and every time you're learning something new or thinking about something, just dig in a little bit more, because it might be an opportunity for you to learn something and then make some changes in your life that just enhance the beauty of being vegan.
100%. And don't be hard on yourself. If we don't know something until we know it, right?
Yes. It's that Maya Angelou quote, right? It's we do our best, do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, do better.
Yes, that's a great quote. I love that quote. Yeah. I've heard that one before. Absolutely. Right. And so we don't have to be stagnant and stay the same way. I mean, just look how much things have changed just in grocery stores, with vegan products. And so who would have thought, especially the vegans, from the 90s and early 2000s, like they had it really harder. Right?
Yeah, they did.
So it's easier more than ever. Yeah.
Yeah. I just realized, Richard, we missed your comment here. Been there, done that. Since we missed when you put it in the chat, I don't know what we were talking about. So if you want to elaborate on that, please do in the chat so that we can know what you meant by that.
Yeah. Sorry about that. We were so caught up in our
Yeah, I totally missed it come in. Sorry about that.
This was a really great conversation. And I feel like we could go on and on about these things. And that's what I like about what we're doing here is we're creating that space to talk about, right, all things vegan. And all things vegan goes beyond the food, goes beyond what's on their plate. It goes into everything. We've talked about medicine and medical, right? That was last week's show, right? We were talking about that. And, or is that 2 weeks ago now? I don't remember. Yeah. All our mornings are blurring in together. But yeah. So anyway, I think this was a really great conversation. And it's 7:35. If Richard can't get back to us on that, maybe he can elaborate in the chat so we can.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing I just wanted to end with before we wrap up is if you're watching the replay, put in the chat replay and you can be part of the conversation there. Me and Kimberly are checking the chat on there, which by the way, Kimberly, we reached 50 subscribers yesterday.
No way.
Last night.
Yay!
Yeah. Before I went to bed last night, I saw we reached 50 subscribers. So
oh my gosh. Hooray. That's
hooray
amazing.
for us.
Yeah. We're getting there. We're doing it. We're doing it.
We're doing it. Yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Tell your friends. Tell your friends about us.
Tell your friends. So yeah, and help us build that subscribers. Help us get to 100.
Yeah.
That's the next mile. I feel like 50 people is 50 subscriber increments.
Yes.
So if you want to help me and Kimberly get to 100 subscribers, subscribe, comment, share with your friends. It helps with the algorithm and all that nonsense that goes on there.
There we go. He was talking about veggies in the fridge going bad. So
yeah.
It's a really common thing, I think. I mean, there's that meme, right, where it's like the veggies rotting in my fridge, and it's like a sad looking like person or whatever, and then it's like me and takeout, and somebody's like skipping away holding hands with someone else. Yeah.
Or the other meme where it's like I just spent $200 on groceries and now I'm gonna order a pizza, right? Like
yep. Yeah. Well, you just did all that work going to the grocery store, and now like who's got the energy to then make food? You're gonna make food tomorrow.
We usually get takeout on grocery shopping days.
Yeah. Oh, humans are so interesting.
We are. And on that note, I think we should wrap up. Kimberly, is there anything you wanted to share about Did You Bring the Hummus before we
Yes. Season 6 is launching on May 12th. So episode 100.
Yeah.
So
excited. Can't wait to listen.
Yeah, we'll be live at 6 a.m. Eastern on Monday, May 12th. So that's next Monday.
Awesome. Wow.
Yeah. How about you? What's going on at Confident Vegan?
The Confident Vegan. Well, I have some shows I'm going to be editing and posting. So Wednesday, I have one I'm posting. So come check out my YouTube channel and see what I post there. But I did post on my Instagram yesterday my recipe for my black bean mango quinoa salad that I made for the potluck that I went to in Schenectady yesterday. So if you're looking for a really tasty, easy, healthy potluck recipe, go head over to my Instagram and you can go check that out.
Awesome.
At the Confident Vegan.
Yeah. Good stuff.
All right. Well, it was so great hanging out with you as always, Kimberly.
Always.
And great seeing you all. Thank you for joining us live, and anyone in the future joining us after. Thank you for tuning in.
Yeah.
All right. See you soon.